The drama surrounding Cleveland sports media exploded the moment Carman decided he had heard enough. What started as another routine debate about quarterbacks turned into a full-blown media firestorm when Lloyd openly suggested that the Browns should move on from Shedeur Sanders. That single idea lit a fuse across the fan base, across radio shows, across social media, and inside the walls of sports talk itself. Carman did not tiptoe around it. He came in heated, frustrated, and visibly disappointed, not just in the take itself, but in what it represented. To Carman, this was not normal criticism. This was not film breakdown. This was not tough love. This was personal. And once a sports argument becomes personal, it stops being about football and starts becoming something much uglier. Carman made it clear that calling for a player to be cut is not some casual opinion you throw out because you are tired of hearing fans argue with you online. It is not something you say because covering a player has become uncomfortable. It is not something you say because his supporters are loud, emotional, and relentless. Wanting someone removed from a roster is serious. It means you are declaring that player has no value, no future, no purpose within the organization. To Carman, that kind of statement requires a real reason. Not vibes. Not irritation. Not ego. A real football reason. And as he broke it down, the more obvious it became that Lloyd's argument was not rooted in performance anymore. It was rooted in frustration. This all started earlier in the season when Lloyd publicly decided that Shedeur Sanders was not the answer. Not maybe. Not probably not. He was convinced. He said Sanders could not make tight throws, could not throw receivers open, could not lead this team. And when Sanders had a rough game, Lloyd jumped on it as proof. He used that single performance to validate everything he already believed. But football rarely follows scripts, and Sanders responded with one of his strongest performances, silencing critics and reminding people why he had supporters in the first place. That moment should have forced reflection. It should have forced adjustment. But instead, Lloyd doubled down. As the season went on, the criticism didn't stop. It shifted. It moved away from production and into nitpicking. Now it was posture, mechanics, body language, protection calls. Details so specific that it no longer felt like scouting and started to feel like searching for flaws just to justify an old opinion. Fans noticed. They pushed back hard. Every time Lloyd spoke, the reaction grew louder. Social media turned into a battlefield, and Lloyd found himself constantly under attack by Sanders supporters. That pressure changed the tone. Instead of recalibrating, Lloyd seemed to grow more extreme. And that is where Carman drew the line. In Carman's eyes, Lloyd didn't want Sanders gone because he was hurting the team. He wanted him gone because the noise around Sanders was hurting him. Because the arguments were exhausting. Because the pushback was relentless. Because covering Sanders had become uncomfortable. And that is not a football reason. That is an emotional one. Carman made a simple point that cut through everything. This is not Lloyd's team. It does not belong to radio hosts or columnists. It belongs to Cleveland. It belongs to the fans. Media members are not decision makers. They are observers, critics, analysts. And when they forget that line, they start confusing opinion with authority. Carman said the only real reason to want a player gone is if he is hurting the team in ways that go beyond the stat sheet. If he is toxic. If he is selfish. If he is dividing the locker room. If he is poisoning chemistry. But everything known about Sanders suggests the opposite. He works. He competes. He earns respect. He fights for his teammates. You do not remove a player like that just because people argue about him online. That is why Carman said Lloyd crossed a line. Not because they disagreed about Sanders as a quarterback, but because Lloyd turned a football discussion into something driven by personal feelings. Carman went as far as saying Lloyd had lost perspective. That his dislike for Sanders and his frustration with Sanders supporters had clouded his judgment. That he was no longer speaking like an analyst but like someone reacting emotionally to being challenged. And in sports media that is dangerous. Because fans listen. Players hear it. Narratives form around it. When someone with a big platform stops being careful with their words, they can change how a player is seen, how a locker room is talked about, how a fan base is divided. This situation is bigger than two media personalities arguing. It exposes a fault line in sports coverage itself. Where does criticism end and targeting begin? When does analysis turn into obsession? How much do personal feelings belong in professional commentary? Ken Carman believes Jason Lloyd failed those tests. That he stopped serving the audience and started serving his own frustration. And the Browns fan base has noticed. They have made their stance clear. They are not defending Sanders blindly. They are defending fairness. They are defending the idea that players should be judged by what they do on the field and how they behave in the locker room, not by how loud their supporters are on the internet. What makes this so intense is that Carmen did not hide behind vague language. He said he would say it to Lloyd's face. He already has. He will say it again. That level of directness is rare in sports media, where people often dance around conflict. But Carmen believed this moment mattered. Because when someone suggests cutting a player for reasons that feel emotional rather than professional, it damages the integrity of the conversation. It stops being about football and starts being about ego, irritation, and personal battles. Now the entire city is watching. Not just to see what happens with Shedeur Sanders, but to see what this moment means for how the Browns are talked about, for how young players are treated, for how much power media voices really hold. The fans have spoken. Carmen has spoken. And Jason Lloyd now stands at the center of one of the most heated debates Cleveland sports media has seen in years. Not because of one take, but because of what that take revealed. If you care about how sports are covered, how players are treated, and how narratives are shaped, this story matters. It is not just about a quarterback. It is about power, responsibility, and the line between criticism and personal bias. Now it is your turn. Do you think Ken Carman was right to go this hard at Jason Lloyd? Or did he take it too far? Do you believe media members should ever call for players to be cut? Or should that line never be crossed? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this video with someone who follows the Browns,